Hey there, Drowsy Historian here. Tonight you are a woman in the 1950s, young, newly married, and newly pregnant. There is optimism in the air, a belief that science has solved the hardships of the past, that suffering belongs to an older generation. When your doctor offers a new pill called Thalidomide, you accept it with gratitude. After all, this is the modern age. What could go wrong? Before we step into this story, do me one small favour. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you'd prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while sleeping. I've linked my favourite pair plus other sleep tools in the description. Now, lie back, get comfortable. Let's begin. You are newly married, newly pregnant, and the world around you seems determined to remind you that this is an age of progress. The war is over, ration books have faded into memory, and everything hums with an optimistic glow. Neon signs buzz outside the corner pharmacy, their coloured light reflected in polished shop windows. Doctors' offices gleam with chrome and glass, their instruments lined up neatly like soldiers ready to fight illness into submission. Newspapers talk about the marvels of science, jet travel, miracle plastics, household appliances that make life effortless. Even in the smallest details of daily life, there is a sense that the future is rushing toward you, brighter and better than anything your mother or grandmother could have imagined. You carry this hope with you, tucked between your ribs, along with the private knowledge that a child is now quietly forming inside you. The news of pregnancy brought joy in the expected way. Relatives beamed, neighbours congratulated. Your husband tried to disguise his nervousness under jokes about fatherhood. For you, the anticipation is equal parts exhilaration and dread. You know pregnancy means months of discomfort, perhaps even danger, but it also feels like stepping into the current of history. Women like you are expected to be the bearers of tomorrow, and tomorrow is promised to be dazzling. When the morning sickness comes, it feels almost reassuring. The nausea is dreadful. You cling to the bathroom sink at dawn, knuckles white, forehead damp. But it is ordinary. It is the same sickness your mother endured, the same your grandmother endured before her. You tell yourself it is a badge of continuity, proof that you're doing what women have always done, carrying life forward. Still, optimism alone cannot quiet the stomach. Each day the queasiness grows more intrusive. Food turns against you. The smell of eggs frying sends you reeling. You try ginger tea, crackers, all the advice passed down through generations, and none of it works. Your husband, well-meaning but helpless, pats your back and brings you cool cloths, but his sympathy is of little practical use. The world outside hums with progress, but inside your home you are hunched on the floor, retching into a basin, wondering if this misery will stretch across every week until the birth. It is in this state that you find yourself in the doctor's office, pale and weary, explaining your nausea. He listens with the brisk efficiency of a man who has heard the same story from countless women. Yet there is something in his manner that feels modern, polished, almost like a salesman presenting a new appliance. He assures you that medicine has advanced, that there is no reason for you to suffer unnecessarily, not in this new era. The world has moved past needless discomfort. There is a pill, he says, designed to help with sleep, nerves, and sickness. It is a modern miracle already in use across Europe, now spreading with the confidence of a discovery too good to be ignored. The name rolls off his tongue with practiced ease, Thalidomide. It sounds sleek, futuristic, like something drawn from the glossy pages of a science magazine. He writes the prescription with a flourish, as if signing you into the future itself. He tells you it is safe, entirely safe, so safe it can be taken throughout pregnancy without concern. He does not hesitate, and his certainty smooths over the gnawing doubts that have begun to form in your mind after so many nights spent clutching your stomach. You are told that it is not only harmless, but that it is part of a new medical age, one where mothers can glide through pregnancy with the same ease promised by labour-saving devices in the kitchen. At the pharmacy, the pill box confirms everything the doctor said. It gleams with bright typography and careful branding, the kind of design that suggests authority and reassurance. It does not look like the mysterious glass bottles of your childhood, filled with tonics and bitter syrups that might or might not work. It looks modern, scientific, trustworthy. On the counter, the pharmacist smiles and tells you that this is what everyone is taking now, that doctors prescribe it everywhere, that you are wise to accept it. The box feels cool and light in your hands, its edges crisp, its promise unspoken but unmistakable. You do not have to suffer. At home, you hold the pill between your fingers for a moment, studying it as though it carries the weight of all that optimism. It is small, almost inconsequential, yet it embodies the world's assurance that science can soothe, that pain can be eliminated, that the future is gentle. You pour a glass of water, sit at the kitchen table, and swallow. The tablet leaves a faint bitterness on your tongue, gone as soon as the water slides down your throat. Relief, you are told, is coming. Relief, you believe, is inevitable. There is no sense of fear, not yet. The idea that a pill could be anything but safe does not cross your mind. It has been prescribed with authority, wrapped in the language of progress, carried in packaging that glows with trust. To question it would be like questioning electricity when you flick the switch, or doubting the safety of the bus that carries you to the market. Science is here to lift burdens, to make the hard parts of life manageable. You lean into that faith as you set the empty glass aside. Already you feel lighter, though whether from the chemistry itself or from the reassurance of having done something modern, you cannot tell. You imagine yourself freer from nausea, able to stand at the stove without gagging, able to rest at night without the constant churn of your stomach. You imagine pregnancy not as a gauntlet of suffering, but as a graceful passage into motherhood. You imagine yourself smiling in photographs, not pale and bent over but radiant, a figure who seems to glide with the times. After a few days of taking the pills, you notice something remarkable begins to happen. The mornings, once defined by the wrenching misery of sickness, now feel bearable again. You no longer wake with your stomach already rebelling, no longer stagger toward the sink in a fog of nausea. Instead, there is stillness, even comfort. The body you had begun to resent for betraying you at every dawn seems to have steadied itself. You can rise, stretch, open the curtains, and see daylight without immediately calculating how close the nearest basin is. The transformation is not dramatic. No trumpet blast of sudden healing, but it is steady enough to feel miraculous. Each day that passes with fewer wretches and less weakness confirms what the doctor promised. The drug works, and you feel relief settle into your bones like a long-awaited guest. The gratitude that follows is immense. To be pregnant in this age feels like fortune smiling directly upon you. You think of your mother, hunched over in her kitchen decades ago, enduring month after month of sickness without complaint, because there was no remedy and no expectation of one. She would have said it was part of the natural order, the cost of carrying life. But here you are, a generation later, spared that misery by modern science. You imagine her amazement if she could see you now, sitting upright at breakfast, sipping tea without gagging, able to smile rather than clutch your stomach. It feels like proof that you live in the best of times, that all the promises of progress are not hollow words, but tangible realities. When you next visit your doctor, you're almost embarrassed at the eagerness with which you thank him. He accepts the gratitude briskly, like a man accustomed to hearing it. You suspect he enjoys the role, the benefactor with the prescription pad, offering mothers the chance to glide through pregnancy rather than crawl. His office, lined with polished equipment and framed diplomas, seems to radiate authority. You tell him the sickness has nearly gone, that you can eat again, that your days are calmer. He nods, satisfied, and reminds you to continue the tablets as prescribed. He says it with the confidence of someone who believes he's carrying women into a new era of motherhood. The reassurance spills outward. When you meet friends or neighbours, you cannot help but share the story of your miraculous reprieve. Over tea, you speak about how lucky women are now, how fortunate you are to be part of the generation that no longer suffers needlessly. Someone mentions that her mother nearly wasted away during her pregnancy, unable to keep food down, while another recalls hearing of women hospitalized for dehydration. You shake your head, pitying those before you, and declare that things are different now. You point to the neat little box of pills and explain that there is no reason for modern mothers to endure the agonies that were once inevitable. They listen with envy and admiration, as though you have stumbled upon a secret that has placed you a step ahead of them. The sense of superiority is not malicious, but it is real. You feel chosen, not in any spiritual sense, but by the accident of birth, born into a time when science seems to care about easing the burdens of women. To be spared suffering feels like a privilege, one that you must appreciate properly. Each time you swallow a pill, you remind yourself of the thousands who could not, of the millions of women across history who had no choice but to grit their teeth and endure. You imagine the ghosts of their nausea hovering just behind you, and you tell yourself you will not take this ease for granted. Daily life begins to reshape itself around this new stability. You can cook again without wincing at the smell of food. You can walk to the shops without fear of collapsing halfway. The house no longer reeks of sickness. Your husband, relieved himself, begins to speak with more confidence about the future, about cribs and schools, and the thousand small hopes that had felt fragile during those endless mornings of weakness. His relief mirrors your own, though he cannot fully grasp the depth of your gratitude. For you, the change feels not just physical, but symbolic, proof that you are living in an enlightened era where even the most private miseries can be banished by modern knowledge. The ritual becomes simple and soothing. Each morning, the pill waits for you on the nightstand, its small form gleaming faintly in the early light. The glass of water beside it is as much a part of the scene as the lamp or the alarm clock. You reach for it automatically, almost reverently, swallowing it down before the day can begin. It is not only medicine, but reassurance, a promise that today will not be like yesterday, that you will not spend hours doubled over in weakness. The box itself becomes an object of comfort, a reminder that science has thought of everything, that clever men in laboratories have smoothed the jagged edges of life, so that you may walk without stumbling. You do not think of the pill as extraordinary anymore, not after the first weeks. It becomes ordinary by repetition, like the act of brushing your teeth or combing your hair. And yet beneath the ordinariness lies an unspoken gratitude. Each day you're spared, nausea feels like another gift, quietly given, and you accept it without question. You trust the system that produced it, the doctors who prescribed it, the pharmacies that stocked it, the companies that marketed it. You trust because it seems foolish not to. If something were wrong, surely someone would have said. Surely the world that prides itself on progress would not allow harm to slip into your body disguised as help. Friends continue to ask about your health, and you answer with a glow that feels genuine. You describe how you can sleep again, how your appetite has returned, how you can even enjoy the simple pleasure of a meal without fearing the consequences. They marvel at your luck, and you tell them it is not luck at all but science. Science has caught up to your needs, and you are the fortunate beneficiary. In these conversations, you sound almost like an evangelist, praising the new age of medicine that makes life more humane, more civilized. If there are faint shadows of doubt anywhere in your mind, they are small enough to be ignored. The weeks begin to flow more smoothly, and with each one your conviction deepens. The hardest part of pregnancy, you tell yourself, is already behind you. The sickness was temporary, and it has been defeated by the simplest of solutions. What remains is the natural progression, the slow swelling of your belly, the gathering of supplies, the anticipation of the child who will arrive. The pill has smoothed the path so completely that you almost feel guilty for how easy it seems. Where your mother endured months of torment, you have only endured weeks. Where she resigned herself to suffering, you have been rescued by progress. It feels like proof that the world truly is advancing, and that you're lucky enough to live in its golden moment. At night, when you glance at the small box on the nightstand, you feel reassured. The pills are more than medicine now. They are tokens of security. Their presence confirms that you're not alone in your struggle, that science itself has taken you by the hand and promised safe passage. You lie back against the pillows, place your hand on your stomach, and smile faintly at the future that seems so much kinder than the past. With energy restored, you begin to look around the house with new eyes. The nursery becomes your focus, a room you'd barely dared to enter when nausea kept you tethered to bed or basin. Now you move through it with purpose, gathering swatches of fabric, baskets of folded linens, pots of paint. The energy you thought pregnancy might deny you has returned, and with it comes a kind of creative urgency. You sew small clothes with meticulous care, hands moving steadily, as though stitching together a future. The garments are impossibly tiny, each button and hem reminding you of the fragile life that will one day wear them. Paintbrush in hand, you cover the walls with fresh colour, each stroke brightening the space as if light itself might take root there. The scent of paint mingles with the faint smell of soap from newly laundered blankets, and you breathe it in as though it were the fragrance of hope. Your husband joins you in the work. He steadies the ladder as you paint near the ceiling, frowning in exaggerated seriousness before grinning at your laughter. On weekends he sands the crib, smoothing the wood until it gleams, running his hand over the rail as though testing it for strength. Together, you assemble a rocking chair, his large hands struggling with the screws while you read aloud from the instructions, both of you dissolving into quiet amusement when a piece refuses to fit. These small labours bind the two of you in anticipation. Each task becomes not just preparation, but participation, a shared ritual of dreaming. Each small task feels momentous. Folding a baby blanket is not merely a chore, but a ceremony. You smooth the fabric, stack it neatly, then adjust it again, unable to resist the need for perfection. Your husband watches you and shakes his head, teasing you for your fussiness, even as he takes the blanket to refold it himself, determined to match your precision. You imagine small fingers tugging at the edges one day. Imagine warm weight curled inside the folds. The rocking chair, freshly polished, sits in the corner, waiting for the countless hours it will hold you through sleepless nights. You imagine the rhythmic sway, the quiet breathing of a child pressed against your chest, and you picture him nearby, half asleep in his own chair, smiling despite exhaustion. Every detail is an act of anticipation, an attempt to conjure the future into being with cloth, wood, and colour. Family and friends congratulate you at every turn. Visitors arrive with flowers and advice, their voices tinged with envy or nostalgia. Some recall their own pregnancies, sharing stories of hardship endured with grim humour, marvelling aloud at how fortunate you are to live in a time when medicine spares you so much of the suffering they once faced. Their words echo your own sense of good fortune, reinforcing your belief that you inhabit the best of all possible worlds. Your husband beams during these visits, showing off the freshly painted nursery as though it were a masterpiece he himself had created. Your mother, watching you bustle about the nursery, shakes her head in half-joking disbelief. She reminds you of her own endless mornings doubled over, of the exhaustion she carried through every trimester. You smile at her and gently insist that times are different now, that she had been unlucky to bear children in an era when women had to endure misery without reprieve. She does not contradict you, but her silence lingers like a shadow at the edge of your certainty. Still, the optimism drowns out every doubt. The baby will be born into a rational age, one where pain is managed, risks are minimised, and science stands ready to smooth life's rougher edges. You imagine your child growing up in this world, spared the struggles that marked your own childhood. There will be better schools, better medicine, more reliable comforts. The stories of hardship that your parents told, of scarcity and sacrifice, will sound almost unbelievable to the child you're preparing for. You envision a life of ease and opportunity, of health preserved by the same modern miracles that already protect you. In the evenings, you settle into a rhythm that feels like a ritual. The knitting needles click softly as you create patterns of yarn that slowly lengthen into sweaters and socks. A vase of flowers sits on the table nearby, their petals opening under the warmth of the lamp. Beside them always rests the box of pills. It sits innocently among the signs of domestic hope, no more intrusive than a thimble or spool of thread. Its presence is reassuring, not alarming, a daily confirmation that everything is under control. You glance at it sometimes with a faint smile, grateful for what it has given you, never imagining it as anything other than a companion in this season of joy. The days pass in a steady rhythm. Mornings begin with the small tablet on the nightstand, followed by a breakfast you can now stomach. Afternoons are filled with errands and preparations, your body moving with the lightness you thought pregnancy might steal. Evenings end with soft lamplight over folded fabrics and neatly stacked clothes. Each part of the cycle reinforces the sense that you are not only enduring pregnancy, but thriving in it. You move through the weeks as though each task were a stepping stone across a river, carrying you closer to the shore where motherhood waits. There are moments when you catch yourself lingering in the nursery longer than necessary, your hand resting absently on the swell of your stomach. You imagine the future as vividly as if it were already here. You see yourself bending over a crib, see tiny hands reaching up toward your face, hear the first uncertain words. You imagine laughter, footsteps echoing down hallways, birthdays crowded with cake and candles. The room itself seems to absorb these imaginings, its painted walls holding them like secrets, its curtains stirring faintly as though responding to the life you are weaving out of hope and cloth. You glance at your husband when you share these dreams aloud, and he smiles, nodding as though he can already see them too. You allow yourself to believe in permanence, in the stability of progress. The box of pills resting quietly beside your flowers and knitting needles reinforces this belief. It is not a reminder of frailty, but of strength, proof that you are supported, protected, carried forward by forces greater than yourself. Science has not only relieved your suffering, but has given you the confidence to dream without reservation. In another age, you might have prepared for motherhood with trepidation, fearing sickness, loss, or the unpredictability of the body. Here now, in this moment of history, you prepare with unshakable assurance. You speak often to friends about this confidence, When they ask about your health, you tell them that you feel almost radiant, that you scarcely recognize the miserable woman you were only weeks ago. They marvel at your energy, and you smile modestly, though inwardly you glow with pride at what feels like triumph. You are not merely enduring pregnancy, you are mastering it. You are proof that modern mothers are different, lighter, freer, less encumbered by the hardships of the past. You speak the words aloud as though they are facts, though they are also incantations, reaffirmations of the faith you have placed in the age you inhabit. Yet even as you prepare, even as you bask in this sense of assurance, something else is happening in silence. It is not visible in the mirror when you smooth your dress over your stomach. It is not audible in the hum of your sewing machine or in the soft conversations with your mother. It does not disturb your sleep or interfere with your appetite, but it is happening nonetheless. Deep inside, beyond your awareness, the body you have entrusted to science is quietly reshaping what it carries. You cannot see it. You cannot feel it. You cannot imagine that the same small pills you trust so dearly are already altering the life you nurture. The nursery, with its folded blankets and neatly painted walls, gives you a sense of order that feels unshakable. Yet when you leave that sanctuary and step back into the world outside, you begin to notice small fissures in the bright surface of your confidence. At first, they are nothing more than looks exchanged in waiting rooms or conversations that falter when you enter. You sit among other expectant mothers, magazines rustling in your lap, the air filled with the hum of fluorescent lights and the faint smell of disinfectant. Normally these places buzz with chatter, women comparing due dates, joking about cravings, sharing complaints about swelling ankles or sleepless nights. Now, though, the air feels charged with something else. You sense it in the way women lower their voices mid-sentence, in the way their eyes slide past yours when you look up from your magazine. Their smiles are forced, polite but thin, as if they are guarding words they dare not share. One morning, while you sit waiting for your name to be called, you hear a whisper from 2 chairs over. The words are muffled, but one phrase lands with unsettling clarity. Something wrong with the baby. The rest trails off into murmurs, quickly hushed when one of them realizes you're listening. They exchange glances and turn away, their conversation ending abruptly. You tell yourself it means nothing, just nerves heightened by pregnancy, but the words cling stubbornly to your mind long after you leave the office. That evening you tell your husband what you overheard. He frowns, shakes his head, and says firmly that people like to scare themselves with nonsense. He pats your hand, urges you not to dwell on it, but the lines of worry at the corners of his eyes betray a flicker of unease. He does not voice aloud. In the market, too, you overhear fragments. A woman standing near the bread counter leans toward her companion and mutters about a neighbour who delivered early. The baby described in vague, unsettling terms. Not right, too small, didn't make it. The listener gasps, then crosses herself quickly, as if warding off ill fortune. When you shift your basket from one arm to the other, they notice you and fall silent, pretending to discuss prices instead. The pattern repeats often enough that you begin to wonder if you're imagining it. You want to believe that the silences are only courtesy, that people do not want to trouble you with stories best left untold. But a part of you wonders if something is moving beneath the surface, a tide of unease that others feel but will not name aloud. When you mention it to your husband over supper, he shakes his head again and insists that markets are full of gossip, that you should not let whispers unsettle what ought to be a happy time. His voice is steady, but he does not meet your eyes. Your doctor, brisk and confident as always, does not indulge the whispers. When you finally mention what you have overheard, he cuts you off almost before you finish the sentence. He leans back in his chair, adjusts his glasses, and gives a short laugh, the sound carrying a note of condescension. Every pregnancy has risks, he says, his voice carefully measured. Babies are fragile, and sometimes things go wrong. It has always been that way, long before we had the means to understand why. You cannot let gossip unsettle you. That kind of talk is dangerous. Fear spreads faster than truth. He straightens the prescription pad on his desk and assures you that nothing has changed, that you should continue your tablets as directed, that you're in safe hands. His tone is so firm, so absolute, that you feel foolish for even raising the concern. Later, when you relay the exchange to your husband, he nods quickly, almost too quickly, and tells you that the doctor must know best. His eagerness to accept the reassurance leaves you wondering if he is trying to convince you or himself. The doctor reminds you of the progress medicine has made. He speaks of how many lives are saved now that once would have been lost, how many hardships have been lifted from women like you. He mentions his own patients, the ones who have delivered healthy babies without complication, and he emphasizes that science is not infallible, but is the surest guide humanity has ever had. His words are not only convincing, but comforting, like a familiar hymn sung with authority. You leave the office chastened, determined to shake off the unease that's been creeping into your mind. At home, you look again at the small box of pills on your nightstand. It rests where it always has, beside the lamp and the glass of water, a quiet reminder of relief. You remember vividly how miserable life had been before you began taking them. The mornings hunched over the sink, the endless nausea that drained every ounce of strength. Without these tablets, your days would be unbearable. You lift the box in your hand, turn it over, study the print on the label. Everything about it looks trustworthy, from the sharp lettering to the neat dosing instructions. It does not resemble danger, it resembles order. You set it back down and tell yourself that no whisper of gossip can outweigh the evidence in your own body. Your husband sees you replace the box, asks gently if you're still worrying, and when you say no, he looks relieved and changes the subject. Still in quieter moments, the silence of others presses in. When you meet friends for tea, you notice the way they hesitate before answering your questions about their pregnancies. Some laugh too brightly, as though determined to mask their worry. Others sip their tea with exaggerated calm. You wonder if they have heard more stories than you, or if they are merely passing along the vague unease that seems to be settling over every conversation. One woman, eyes red-rimmed, excuses herself early, and you feel the weight of her grief, though she says nothing. The room grows emptier, and you're left alone with the stubborn sense that there are truths circulating just beyond your reach. When you tell your husband about the awkward silences among your friends, he squeezes your hand and insists that people sometimes say less when they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. You want to believe him, but doubt lingers. You push the doubts aside. Fear, you remind yourself, is irrational. Progress is not. It would be foolish to let the half-heard stories of strangers outweigh the judgment of your doctor, the relief you feel in your own body, the authority of the age you live in. Science has given you comfort when generations before you had none. To mistrust it now would be like stepping backward into darkness, surrendering to superstition instead of embracing reason. You tell yourself that the women whispering in waiting rooms are simply nervous, that pregnancy always breeds fear, that rumours spread because uncertainty demands explanation. The truth is more likely that nothing unusual is happening at all, only the same tragedies that have always existed, recast as something sinister by anxious minds. So you choose trust. You swallow the next pill with deliberate calm, letting the water carry it smoothly down your throat. You remind yourself that the world has moved forward, that you're fortunate to live in an era when medicine stands between you and needless suffering. You repeat the words your doctor gave you as though they were an incantation. Every pregnancy has risks, but science makes them fewer. Your husband, watching you finish your glass of water, nods approvingly and tells you that this is the sensible way forward. You believe it because you want to believe it, because the alternative is too terrible to entertain. The months pass with their mixture of routine and quiet anticipation. You continue your pills each morning as faithfully as brushing your teeth, convinced that you're carrying the future safely within you. The nursery grows more complete with every week, its shelves filled with folded clothes, its crib draped with blankets that smell faintly of soap and sunshine. The whispers you once overheard in waiting rooms fade to the background, dismissed as the nervous chatter of women too frightened to trust in science. Your own body swells steadily, your movements slower now, your breaths deeper, but you endure with a sense of purpose. At every appointment, your doctor assures you that things are progressing normally, that all is as it should be. The days become a countdown, each X you mark on the calendar, drawing you closer to the culmination of all this preparation. When labour finally begins, it is not the gentle nudge you had half hoped for, but a violent surge that steals your breath and doubles you over with its force. The first contraction claws through you like an unseen hand twisting deep inside, leaving you gripping the edge of the bed with white knuckles. You remind yourself that this is natural, expected, even necessary. Pain, your mother told you, is part of the bargain of motherhood, the trial that makes the rewards sweeter. You steady your breathing, wipe your forehead, and wait for the next wave. It comes swiftly, sharper than the last, and then another after it, until time itself seems to break into fragments, measured only in the intervals between each tightening grip of your body. The hours blur. You're moved to the hospital, wheeled through corridors that smell faintly of antiseptic and floor polish. The fluorescent lights above you glare white and cold as they flicker past. The delivery room is bright, its instruments gleaming under metal trays, the sheets crisp and stiff against your skin. Nurses bustle around you, their faces professional, their voices clipped. The doctor arrives with brisk authority, his manner calm but firm, giving instructions that others hurry to follow. You are at the centre of this whirlwind, yet also somehow alone, fighting through each contraction with the knowledge that only you can bear this weight forward. The pain is immense, unrelenting, but you tell yourself it is bearable. It has to be bearable because at the end of it lies the prize you have envisioned for months. A swaddled infant placed in your arms, the sweet relief of hearing a first cry, the reassurance of life confirmed in sound and motion. You cling to that image during the darkest moments, when the contractions leave you gasping, when sweat soaks your gown, when your muscles feel stretched to the point of tearing. You whisper to yourself that the suffering has a purpose, that it will soon dissolve into joy. The hours crawl, yet at last the moment arrives when they tell you it is time to push. You grip the sheets, teeth clenched, pouring every ounce of strength you have into the effort. The room fills with commands and encouragements, the voices of strangers guiding you through the storm of pain. You feel the body within you shift downward, feel the tearing agony of progress, and then the sudden, shuddering release, as life moves from inside you to the world outside. You collapse against the pillows, chest heaving, eyes burning with tears of exhaustion. Relief floods you in a rush. It is over, you think. The hardest part is over, and now comes the reward you have been promised. But the reward does not come. The room, which should erupt into smiles and congratulatory voices, grows heavy instead with silence. No jubilant cry splits the air, no exclamations of joy or relief. The doctor's hands, still moving with clinical precision, seem tense in a way you have never seen before. His mouth is set in a hard line, his eyes fixed on what lies just beyond your view. The nurse who had been holding your hand a moment ago lets it slip from hers, her gaze turning downward as though ashamed. You lie there, chest heaving, waiting for the sound you know should come. The wail of a newborn, the confirmation that all this pain has birthed something living. Instead, there is only the scrape of instruments on metal trays and the murmur of voices pitched too low for you to make out. Panic prickles at the edges of your exhaustion. You lift your head, straining to see, but the angle denies you any clear view. You ask a question, your voice hoarse, but no one answers right away. The doctor glances at the nurse and the nurse looks quickly away. Another contraction of fear grips you, sharper than any that racked your body before. The silence thickens, pressing against your ears until it roars like the absence of sound itself. Your heart pounds as though trying to fill the void. Finally, the doctor clears his throat, his voice slow and deliberate, as though each word costs him something to deliver. His expression is not one of triumph, but of resignation. He looks at you, but not quite into your eyes, his gaze hovering somewhere just above or beside them. The nurse busies herself with a sheet, avoiding you entirely. You know then that whatever words he is about to say will not be the ones you have been waiting for. They will not bring joy, only a collapse of the image you have been carrying in your mind for months. When he finally speaks, the words slice through the air with brutal clarity, piercing the fog of exhaustion that has dulled your senses. They are words that cannot be softened, words that banish every image of swaddled warmth and joyful cries you had held on to. He says, "There's something wrong." The sentence lands with the force of a blow. Your breath catches, your body, still trembling from the effort of labour, feels suddenly colder, heavier. The silence that follows is worse than the pain, worse than the hours of contractions, worse even than the fear that had begun to gnaw at you. You lie there, staring at the ceiling, your heart stumbling in your chest, knowing that whatever future you imagined, whatever dreams you stitched into blankets and painted onto nursery walls, has shifted irrevocably in the space of that single sentence. The words still echo in your head, dull and heavy, when the nurse finally approaches with a bundle wrapped in thin hospital linen. You expect to hear the belated cry at last, some sign of vitality to counter the doctor's grim announcement. Instead, the silence continues, broken only by the faint squeak of her shoes on the linoleum floor. She lays the infant gently in your arms, as though the weight she carries is more than physical, as though she's passing on a burden she would rather keep at a distance. You look down, breath held, and see the truth for yourself. Your daughter is alive, eyes squeezed shut against the brightness of the world, chest rising and falling with shallow effort. But where you expected wholeness, you find absence. Her arms and legs are shortened, twisted, unfinished, as if her body had been sketched only halfway before the artist's hand faltered. For a moment you cannot move. The exhaustion of labour combines with the shock to root you to the bed, your arms stiff around the small fragile form. You had imagined countless times the sight of your baby's face, the curl of her fingers, the kick of her feet. All of those images dissolve as you stare, unbelieving, at the body that does not match them. The doctor says something in the background, but the words do not register. All you hear is the pounding of your heart and the thin rasp of your daughter's breath. Then the voices sharpen, slipping into clinical language that feels like a blade against your skin. They call it an abnormality or a malformation. One nurse, too young to know better, mutters the word defect before catching herself. The vocabulary fills the room like smoke, choking out anything human, reducing your daughter in your arms to a list of failures. You clutch her closer in defiance, as if by holding on tightly enough, you can shield her from the language, from the judgment that hangs so thickly in the air. But no matter how close you hold her, you cannot silence the words that swarm like flies. Abnormality, malformation, defect. Each term settles into you like lead, pressing down on your ribs until breathing feels like labour all over again. And yet, beneath the shock and the horror, something primal stirs. Love, raw and immediate, wells up in you with unexpected force. The sight of her face, small, wrinkled, vulnerable, tears open a place in you that no amount of clinical vocabulary can reach. Your arms tighten instinctively. Your cheek brushes against the thin down of hair, and you feel the warmth of life against your skin. Whatever shape her body takes, whatever name the doctors give it, this is your daughter. The world may look away, may label and categorize, but your heart insists on love. It rises alongside dread, coiled with guilt, tangled with fear, but it rises all the same. The guilt is immediate and it is crushing. Even as you hold her close, a voice inside whispers accusations. You remember every tablet, every swallow, every reassurance. You remember the box on the nightstand, the neat instructions, the way you convinced yourself that progress was safe, that gossip was superstition. You trusted, you believed, and now you stare at the consequence of that trust. Nestled against your chest, fragile and incomplete. Rationally, you tell yourself you could not have known. The doctor assured you. The pharmacist smiled. Everyone said it was safe, but guilt has little to do with reason. It crawls into your veins all the same, whispering that you failed her before she even had a chance to begin. The doctor speaks again, his tone carefully measured, as if afraid that any slip will ignite hysteria. He repeats the words, abnormality, malformation. He insists that such things happen without cause, that nature is sometimes cruel. He advises calm, says there will be time later to consider options, to speak with specialists, to discuss what this means. He never says the name of the drug, never even glances at the box that sits in your bag beside the bed. The silence around it is louder than any confession. You understand that you're not meant to ask, not meant to press too hard, not meant to disrupt the order that insists that some children are simply unlucky. The nurse avoids your gaze, busying herself with linens and instruments. She does not want to meet your eyes because she knows that behind them you are searching for answers she cannot give. Another nurse, older and kinder, places a hand briefly on your shoulder. It is a gesture meant as comfort, but it carries pity instead, a quiet acknowledgement that your dreams have been dashed in a single moment. Her eyes, when they meet yours, are damp with compassion, but they too carry no answers. You cradle your daughter tighter, your arms aching from the tension of holding her as though you might anchor her more firmly to the world. You whisper words you cannot remember later, a mixture of apologies and endearments, promises you're not sure you can keep. You feel the weight of the future pressed down on you, heavier than she is. The nursery waiting at home flashes in your mind. The painted walls, the folded blankets, the careful stitches in the tiny clothes, all of it prepared in blind anticipation, all of it built on faith in a miracle pill that now feels like betrayal. You still haven't been able to see your husband. Husbands are not permitted in the delivery room, and the staff tell you he will be able to come during the next visiting hours. You know he has been informed in some way, though you cannot imagine what words they used. The thought of him walking in, trying to mask his own shock while you cradle the truth in your arms, lingers at the edge of your mind, deepening the weight pressing down on you now. The optimism that had buoyed you through the months collapses in on itself. The faith you carried in science, in progress, in the authority of the men who promised safety, shatters like glass dropped on stone. You are left with fragments, love for your daughter, guilt that gnaws without mercy, dread that spreads its roots through every corner of your mind. The words modern miracle ring bitterly in your memory, twisted into mockery by the reality in your arms. What was promised as ease has delivered anguish. What was packaged as safety has brought silence and shame. The days after the birth unfold in a haze that should have been brightened by joy, but instead are muted by avoidance. You lie in your hospital bed with your daughter beside you, her chest rising and falling with each tiny breath. Doctors come and go, their visits brisk, their manner polished but distant. They check charts, murmur to each other in low tones, and depart quickly. Their eyes rarely meet yours for long. When you try to press them with questions, their answers scatter like dry leaves, vague phrases delivered with professional detachment. Some outcomes can't be predicted. There are many factors we don't fully understand. None of it satisfies. Each response feels like a wall built hastily in front of you, a barrier to the truth you can feel lurking just behind their guarded faces. The nurses are kinder, but their kindness often comes wrapped in pity. One helps you to your feet, supports your shaky body as you shuffle down the corridor. But when you ask her directly why your daughter's limbs are not whole, she falters. She stammers something about nature being unpredictable, about no one being to blame. Another nurse tidies your room and tells you gently that babies come in all forms, that you should focus on the love you feel rather than the shape of her body. The words are well-meaning but hollow. They are not answers. They are evasions, and you hear the strain in their voices, the hesitation that betrays knowledge they will not share. Your husband arrives during visiting hours, wearing his best attempt at composure. He carries flowers and a nervous smile, his shoes clicking too loudly on the polished floor as he approaches the bed. When you place your daughter in his arms, his face shifts, though he tries to disguise it. The smile holds, but you see the flicker in his eyes, the hesitation in his breath. He kisses your forehead, whispers that she's beautiful, that you've done well, and you cling to the words even as you feel how tightly he grips the child, as though unsure how to hold her. He asks the doctors questions you have already asked, but their responses to him are no clearer. They speak with the same practiced vagueness, the same careful deflection. He nods as though he accepts it, but later, when you're alone together, he admits that the answers sound thin, rehearsed, unsatisfying. Still, he urges you not to worry too much. He tells you that worrying will not help, that the important thing is your daughter is alive. You know he means well, but his words fall into the same pattern as the staff. Distraction, not explanation. When he leaves at the end of visiting hours, the room feels emptier than before. His absence stings, though you know it is not his choice. Husbands are not permitted to stay overnight in the ward. You lie back against the pillow, your daughter tucked in beside you, and stare at the ceiling as the silence thickens again. Your daughter lies swaddled in her cot, her small face pinched as she sleeps, her chest rising with fragile determination. You watch her for hours, unable to reconcile the depth of your love with the gnawing weight of dread. Each time you reach for her, you're caught between fierce tenderness and the sharp sting of guilt. You want desperately to believe the reassurances offered by the staff, but the avoidance tells you more than their words. It tells you that there is something they will not admit. It tells you that the silence itself is deliberate. The word that haunts you is never spoken aloud. Thalidomide. You have taken the tablets faithfully for months, their presence on your nightstand as ordinary as the ticking clock, their promise of relief unquestioned. Now in the aftermath, that word hovers at the edges of every hushed conversation. You hear the syllables almost form on a nurse's lips before she swallows them. You sense it in the sidelong glance two doctors exchange as they review notes at the foot of your bed. No one dares to say it outright, but the silence around it is so loud that it becomes deafening. The omission itself feels like an accusation, an invisible verdict handed down without a trial. Visitors arrive, family, friends, their joy tempered by unease. Some coo over the baby politely, avoiding mention of her limbs. Their eyes fixed too firmly on her face. Others glance once quickly, then fall silent, fumbling for words that do not come. A few whisper in corners of the room, voices low, their expressions grim. You hear fragments again. So many cases, they don't admit it. It's that pill. But when you turn your head to ask, the voices die, and you're left in the same fog of implication. Half-truths drifting through the air, like smoke that burns the lungs, but cannot be grasped. At night, the silence presses hardest. The ward grows dim, the corridors quiet, and you're left alone, with your daughter's shallow breathing. You replay every moment of the past months, every swallow of water that carried a pill into your body, every reassurance you accepted, every time you brushed aside fear as irrational. You search your memory for warnings you might have missed, for signs you might have ignored. The silence of the hospital seems to echo the silence within you, the absence of an answer, the absence of clarity. It wraps around you until sleep feels impossible, replaced by the endless rhythm of doubt. When the day of discharge arrives, your husband returns with his usual steady smile, though it looks more strained than before. He carries your bag, signs the forms when the doctor hands them over, and thanks the staff with the politeness expected of him. The doctor rattles through instructions in a brisk tone, then signs the papers with a flourish that feels more like dismissal than permission. Not once does the word thalidomide pass his lips. Not once does he offer explanation beyond the tired refrain. Sometimes these things happen. You walk slowly out of the hospital together, your daughter in your arms, a blanket tucked tightly around her. The corridor stretches long, the exit doors bright with daylight beyond them. Families pass by, some with flowers, others with balloons, their laughter echoing against the walls. You feel as though you move in a different world entirely, one where joy has been replaced by unease, where each step carries the weight of unanswered questions. Your husband stays close at your side, his hand on your shoulder, his presence a comfort, and yet also a reminder of the silence he too has chosen to accept. The drive home is quiet, too quiet for the occasion it should have been. Your husband grips the steering wheel more tightly than necessary, his knuckles pale against the dark leather, his eyes fixed on the road as though the act of driving demands every ounce of his attention. You sit beside him, your daughter swaddled in your arms, her small breath steady against your chest. The hum of the engine fills the silence that neither of you seems willing to break. Now and then he glances at you, his mouth twitching with the effort to shape words. He never speaks. Outside the car window, the familiar streets slip past, but they feel different, stretched, subdued, as though the world itself is reluctant to welcome you back. When he finally turns into the drive and shuts off the engine, the tick of the cooling motor is the only sound, a mechanical heartbeat that feels louder than your own. Inside the house, the familiar rooms greet you with an air of unease. The nursery is waiting, its walls still bright with paint, its shelves stacked with folded clothes and blankets, the crib polished and ready. Yet the room feels altered, its brightness mocking rather than comforting. You stand in the doorway with your daughter in your arms, and your husband lingers just behind you, staring at the careful order you created months before. Neither of you speaks. The silence stretches thick with the memory of how different this moment was supposed to feel. He eventually sets the hospital bag down with a sigh and moves away, leaving you to place her gently in the crib. The sight of her small body against the bedding pulls at your heart with fierce tenderness and with an ache that no words can soothe. It does not take long for the neighbourhood to notice your return. Curtains twitch when the car door slams shut. Neighbours lean on garden fences a little longer than usual, their conversations broken into fragments you can't quite catch. At first, their questions seem polite enough. How are you feeling? How is the baby? When might they visit? But soon the tone shifts. Their smiles falter when they ask to see her. Some look at her once and then quickly away, as if the sight alone is dangerous. Others linger on her limbs too long, their expressions tightening before they recover and paste on politeness. Whispers sharpen into speculation. Perhaps you drank too much during the pregnancy. Perhaps you smoked. Perhaps you sinned. You hear these words second-hand, carried back by sympathetic ears, but their sting is no less sharp. Your husband hears them too, though he pretends not to. When you tell him what has been said, his face hardens. He mutters that people should mind their business, once even snapping back at a neighbour who speculated too loudly, but mostly he swallows the words, tucking them inside. He insists that talking about gossip gives it power. His silence is meant to protect you, but it leaves you feeling alone with the weight of judgment. He closes ranks in one way, retreating into himself, while you are left exposed to every whisper and stare. When you take your daughter out in the pram, the scrutiny is more direct. Strangers allow their eyes to linger, their faces tightening into pity or discomfort. Children point before their mothers hush them, pulling them away quickly, as though the sight might infect them. Shopkeepers who once greeted you warmly now hesitate, their words clipped, their smiles strained. Some customers in queues shift aside, pretending courtesy, but eager to put a little more distance between themselves and your child. Your husband responds to all of this by staring straight ahead, pushing the pram with rigid determination, his eyes fixed on the pavement. He never acknowledges the looks, never comments on them. You wish he would admit he sees them too, if only to prove you're not imagining the shift in the world's gaze. But he refuses, whether out of pride, denial, or fear, you cannot tell. Invitations fade. Friends who once promised to stop by grow vague, their visits postponed again and again. Neighbours who used to bring bread or jam now wave from a distance, their voices bright with excuses. Even the women you shared tea with during pregnancy drift away, their laughter muted, their conversations held without you. You had thought motherhood would fold you more firmly into the circle of community, but instead it pushes you to its edges. Your husband shrugs when you remark on the silence, insisting people are just busy. You hear the hollowness in his words. He knows, just as you do, that gossip has taken root and grown wild in your absence. At home, the distance between you grows. He returns from work each evening with weary eyes, sometimes standing in the nursery doorway before stepping inside. He loves his daughter. You see it in the way he cradles her carefully, in the way he bends to kiss her forehead. Yet there is hesitation in his touch, a stiffness in his smile. Once, late at night, he murmurs that she will have a difficult life. The words are heavy, weighted with helplessness. You want him to speak of the drug, of the doctors, of the betrayal you both suspect, but he falls silent instead. His silence mirrors the hospital's, avoidance dressed as composure. He cannot bear to press, and so the burden of suspicion rests with you. Each errand, each trip into the world, reinforces the gulf between you and others. The shopkeeper's thin smile, the woman who crosses the street rather than greet you, the sudden hush in a room when you enter, all remind you of how far you have fallen from the optimism you once embraced. Your husband notices, of course, but endures it with stoicism, pretending indifference. His method is survival by silence. Yours is survival by love, fierce and consuming, which both shields you and cuts you open. Even family cannot fully shelter you. Some beam politely and insist that every child is a blessing, but others hesitate before holding her, their eyes betraying unease. A cousin comments that children like that face too many obstacles. An aunt suggests softly that perhaps God has a reason, her tone meant as comfort, but landing like blame. Your husband stiffens when he hears such remarks, but does not argue. Later, He insists they were only trying to help. You nod, but the sting remains. Another reminder that judgment falls heaviest on you. Anger takes root slowly, almost reluctantly, but once it settles inside you, it becomes impossible to shake. The whispers of neighbours sting, but it is the silence of the hospital, the avoidance of those who should have spoken plainly, that festers most deeply. At night, with your daughter cradled against your chest, you lie awake replaying the evasions you were offered, the phrases polished smooth by repetition. You hear the same tired reassurances in your mind. Sometimes these things happen. Every pregnancy carries risks, and you know with mounting certainty that they are lies of convenience. They are words designed to protect institutions, not people. You realise you cannot remain passive. If no one will offer answers willingly, you will demand them. Your first demands are directed at the doctor, the man whose confidence had once been so reassuring, whose certainty had persuaded you to trust the tablets as harmless. You sit in his office, your daughter in your lap, her shortened arms visible against the blanket. You do not speak gently this time. You ask plainly, "Why did this happen?" He clears his throat, shuffles papers, and offers the same phrases he always has. Nature is unpredictable. Malformations have always occurred. There are too many variables to know for certain. His gaze skims over your daughter briefly before returning to the safety of his notes. Your husband sits beside you, silent, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. You feel his tension, his desire to avoid conflict, but you press harder, your voice sharp with anger. The doctor's face tightens, his tone grows clipped, and at last he says the words that end the discussion. "I assure you, it has nothing to do with your medication." The certainty rings false, and you know it. He says the name of the drug only once, quickly, before moving on as though it is not worth dwelling on. His refusal to linger on it speaks louder than his denial. You leave his office with the sense that you have not encountered ignorance, but obstruction, a wall deliberately raised to block you from the truth. Your husband tries to comfort you afterward, muttering that perhaps the doctor is right. Perhaps there is no direct link. His words are not cruel, but they feel like betrayal all the same. You do not want reassurance, you want honesty. You write letters next. One to the pharmaceutical company, whose name is printed neatly on the box you have now hidden away in a drawer you cannot bring yourself to open. The reply is brief, polite, and utterly dismissive. They assure you that thalidomide is safe when used as directed, that no credible evidence connects it to birth abnormalities, that unfortunate cases such as yours are tragic, but unrelated. They thank you for your concern and suggest you consult your physician for further support. The letter feels like a slap, its language carefully engineered to close the door in your face. Governments are little better. You send inquiries and in return, you receive pamphlets about supporting families with special needs, forms for assistance that lead nowhere, and assurances that investigations are ongoing. Ongoing becomes a word that haunts you. It means nothing is being done quickly. It means officials prefer delay to acknowledgement. You realise that bureaucracy itself is a form of silence, one that hides behind procedure and paperwork, instead of risking responsibility. Your husband reads the replies with you, his lips pressed thin. He shakes his head, angry but weary, and insists that pushing too hard will get you nowhere. He believes that institutions do not bend for people like you, that fighting them is a waste of strength you should spend on your daughter instead. You know he is trying to protect you from disappointment, but his resignation fuels your anger. You cannot accept silence as your daughter's inheritance. In the weeks that follow, you notice small stories appearing in the newspapers. At first, they are tucked away in the back pages, short reports of unusual cases, mothers across the country whispering the same suspicions you carry. The language is cautious, hedged with uncertainty, designed not to provoke lawsuits. But gradually, the stories grow louder. Photographs begin to appear, blurred, grainy images of infants with shortened limbs, mothers clutching them with expressions torn between love and despair. The sight is both devastating and affirming. You are not alone. What happened to you has happened to many. Yet even as the stories spread, officials resist linking names to blame. No minister stands at a podium to acknowledge error. No company executive admits negligence. The word thalidomide appears only sparingly, and always softened with qualifiers, possibly linked, further study required. It is as if the world is willing to admit tragedy, but not culpability. To say the name plainly would mean admitting that the trust given to doctors, to science, to government, was betrayed on a vast scale. And so the silence continues, even as evidence piles up in front of everyone's eyes. Your husband reads the articles with you at the kitchen table, the paper spread between cups of cold tea. He frowns, mutters that it seems damning, but then looks away. Unwilling to voice the conclusion, you already feel burning in your chest. You want him to say it, to share the fury that consumes you, but he cannot. He carries his grief differently, by swallowing it, by turning back to work, by trying to carve a sense of normalcy from days that no longer feel normal. His silence is another reminder that you must be the one to carry this fight. You begin to seek out other mothers. Some you find through whispered introductions, others through the names tucked into the back of newspaper stories. Their faces are tired, their eyes lined with sleepless nights, but their words match your own. They speak of doctors who avoided the truth, of letters from companies that denied responsibility, of governments that stalled. You feel both comforted and enraged. Comforted that you're not alone, enraged that the pattern is so obvious, and yet still buried beneath denial. Together you trade stories, compare letters, share fragments of the truth that officials would rather you never piece together. But even among yourselves, there is a sense of futility. The machine you're up against is enormous. Pharmaceutical companies with endless resources, governments with bureaucracies designed to deflect rather than answer, newspapers cautious not to overstep. The battle for truth feels like trying to carve a canyon with a spoon. You begin to understand that this will not be a quick fight, nor one that yields clean victories. It will be long, exhausting, and cruel. And in the meantime, your daughter grows heavier in your arms, her breath steady against your chest, her needs immediate. You recognize that survival itself is now double-edged. It means carrying her forward each day, feeding her, clothing her, teaching her to live in a world that already stares too much. But it also means carrying the weight of betrayal, not just your own, but that of thousands of mothers who trusted and were deceived. Life becomes improvisation. Nothing about caring for your daughter can be taken for granted. The tasks that once seemed simple, when imagined in the glow of pregnancy, are revealed to be constant trials, demanding ingenuity you did not know you possessed. Feeding her requires balancing bottles and cloths in awkward positions, adjusting your grip carefully so she can reach despite her shortened arms. Carrying her means learning to hold her close against you at all times, because she cannot cling tightly the way other infants might. Dressing her involves trial and error, adapting clothes that were never designed for her body, sleeves hanging uselessly or hems catching where they should not. Each action is accompanied by the quiet reminder that the world was not built with her in mind. You find yourself cutting seams, sewing alterations by lamplight, inventing new ways to make the everyday possible. Your body grows weary under the constant strain. You had once thought the exhaustion of pregnancy and childbirth would be the pinnacle of fatigue, but now you realize it was only a prelude. Every movement requires vigilance. Every outing requires planning. The stroller creaks with the weight of blankets and cushions used to support her properly, the pram becoming a contraption jury-rigged to suit her needs. At night you dream of dropping things, bottles, spoons, clothes, waking with a start to find your hands, aching as though they'd been clenched even in sleep. Yet you cannot allow yourself to falter. Love demands endurance, necessity demands creativity, and so you press on, even when the edges of your patience fray. Public spaces are merciless in their indifference. Buildings rise with steps but no ramps. Their thresholds silent barriers you must navigate awkwardly with pram and child. Shops have narrow aisles that force you to squeeze sideways, muttering apologies as you bump displays. Buses stop with a groan of brakes, doors too narrow, steps too high, leaving you stranded on the pavement. No one has thought to make space for children like yours. No one has imagined a world where a body might not fit the mould. People stare but do not help. Or if they do, their assistance comes with words that sting. Poor thing, such a pity. God must have his reasons. Each remark piles onto the weight already pressing against your ribs. You begin to map your world by what is accessible and what is impossible. The market can be managed if you go at quieter hours, when you can manoeuvre without too many obstacles. The church steps remain an impassable wall unless someone strong is willing to help lift you. Parks are avoided altogether. The benches offer no comfort when strangers feel entitled to comment on your daughter's body as if it were public property. The city, once a familiar landscape of errands and routines, becomes a gauntlet. Yet still you go, because she must eat, she must grow, she must live as fully as possible, even in a world that has not imagined her existence. Your husband helps when he can, but his work keeps him away for long hours. He returns in the evenings with weary eyes, loosening his tie with one hand while offering to take the child with the other. He carries her awkwardly at first, still tentative, but his love is visible in the way he studies her face, kisses her forehead, whispers her name softly. On weekends, he attempts small adjustments around the house, carving notches in furniture, padding edges, fixing straps, little inventions meant to ease your days. His efforts bring comfort, but they also highlight how alone you are in creating solutions. There are no manuals, no official supports, only what you can devise with scissors, scraps of fabric, and stubborn determination. Exhaustion carves itself into you, hollowing out your cheeks, tightening the skin beneath your eyes. There are moments you want to collapse, to admit defeat, to hand the burden to someone else, if only for an hour. But there is no one else. Relatives visit less frequently now, their politeness stiff, their eyes betraying discomfort. Friends fade further away, their excuses flimsy. The state offers little more than forms to fill, each requiring proof that never seems sufficient, each leading to another desk, another denial. You find yourself muttering bitterly at the irony. Modern medicine claimed to make pregnancy easier, to lift burdens. Yet here you are, shouldering a weight greater than any borne by your mother or grandmother. You catch glimpses of the old world, the one you once inhabited, and they cut like glass. Women pushing prams down the street, chatting easily, their children cooing and grasping toys. Mothers in waiting rooms, laughing about sleepless nights, as though fatigue were their only trial. The distance between you and them feels immeasurable. Once you had thought you were part of that circle, a modern mother blessed by progress. Now you stand outside it, marked not by choice but by circumstance, defined not by optimism but by endurance. Your daughter grows. The days that once seemed endless with improvisation become years, each one reshaping her into someone remarkable. She learns to adapt in ways that defy the limits set by her body. Her shortened arms, her small hands, her legs that do not match the proportions of her peers. All of these should have confined her, yet she refuses to let them define her entirely. She learns to grip pencils differently, to steady cups against the table so she can drink without spilling, to maneuver toys in ways you had never imagined possible. Each adaptation is a quiet act of rebellion against the fate written into her body by the tablets you once trusted. Pride swells in you when you see her persistence, when her laughter fills the house despite the endless obstacles. But with that pride comes guilt, heavy and unrelenting. Every adaptation she makes is a reminder that she should not have had to. Each clever invention of hers is traced in your mind, back to the pills you swallowed, to the faith you placed in progress that betrayed you both. School is its own battlefield. The building was never designed with children like her in mind. Desks are too high, playgrounds unwelcoming, the stares of other children unkind. Teachers, well-meaning but unprepared, struggle to know how to treat her. Some pity her, showering her with attention that singles her out more than it helps. Others quietly lower expectations, deciding before she has the chance to prove otherwise that she will never keep up. She notices, of course, children always notice, and she pushes back with a stubborn streak you recognise in yourself. Still, the battles take their toll. Each evening she comes home with new stories of whispered taunts or the quiet cruelty of exclusion. You cradle her, praise her resilience, and seethe with anger at a world that promised fairness but delivers only barriers. Your husband watches too, though in his way. He builds small contraptions to make her life easier. Wooden stools to reach sinks, padded grips for cutlery, adjustments to furniture so she can sit more comfortably. His hands are rough from work, but his patience with her is gentle. He kneels beside her to help with puzzles, listens when she describes her day, and offers quiet encouragement when she grows frustrated. Yet he carries his sorrow silently. At night, when he thinks you're asleep, you see him staring at the ceiling, his face shadowed by helplessness. He rarely speaks of his grief, but it lingers in the house all the same, a weight shared yet unspoken. Outside your home, the world shifts. In the early years, outrage burned hot. Newspapers printed stories of drug tragedies. Mothers with infants whose bodies bore the same unmistakable marks as your daughters. There were photographs, headlines, angry editorials demanding accountability. For a time, you felt certain the truth would force change, that governments would be compelled to act, that companies would be held responsible for the suffering they caused. You clipped the articles, saved them in a box, thinking they might one day form a record of justice in the making. But outrage does not last. As the years roll on, other stories take its place. Wars flare, scandals emerge, politicians fall, new disasters capture the public eye. The headlines shrink, moving from the front page to the margins, until eventually the word thalidomide appears only rarely, tucked away as if it were already history rather than ongoing reality. The promises of swift action fade into bureaucratic delay, and the reports that once felt urgent dissolve into vague studies that lead nowhere. The world decides it has heard enough. Your fight, once echoed by public voices, is reduced again to private endurance. You feel the betrayal keenly. You had believed that exposing the truth would bring change, that the weight of public sympathy would force institutions to acknowledge what they had done. Instead, you watch as silence reclaims the story, burying it under new headlines. For officials and companies, the scandal is an inconvenience to be outlasted. For you, it is the shape of your daughter's arms, the way her clothes must always be altered, the exhaustion of carrying her through streets with no ramps, the pitying looks that never end. For them, thalidomide becomes a historical footnote. For you, it remains your daily reality. Your husband grows quieter as the years pass. His love for his daughter is evident in his actions, in the way he carries her when her shortened legs make walking too exhausting, and in the way he insists she can do more than others believe. But he rarely speaks of the injustice anymore. When you bring up the fading outrage, he shakes his head and mutters that the world moves on, that there is no use in expecting it to dwell on your pain. His resignation angers you, but you also understand it. He is worn down just as you are. Though he hides his weariness behind work, routine, and silence, you carry your fury openly. He swallows his. The difference sometimes sets you apart, but in the end, you are bound by the same grief. You watch your daughter continue to grow, her laughter a reminder of resilience, her frustrations a mirror of your own. She adapts again and again, but each adaptation deepens the scar of guilt inside you. You think of the pills, the smooth tablets you swallowed without hesitation, their bitterness washed down with water. You see them everywhere, in the way she grips a spoon, in the way she cannot climb stairs without help, in the way strangers stare at her in public. They are etched into her body, carved into the lines of her life, impossible to forget or forgive. You also see them in yourself. Each time you fold her altered clothes, each time you carry her through an inaccessible street, each time you comfort her after another cruel remark, you feel the weight of your choice. It was not ignorance, you remind yourself, but trust. You trusted doctors, companies, the shining promise of modern medicine. And that trust has left its mark, a mark that will not fade with time. The world may forget consigning thalidomide to the margins of history, but you cannot. The years accumulate and you grow old. Time, once marked by bottles, feedings, and the weight of your daughter in your arms, is now measured by the quiet rhythm of days that blur together. Your body aches in ways it never did before, your hands stiff when you try to sew, your back sore from years of lifting, carrying and bending. The mirror offers a face lined with age, but it is not the lines that shock you most. It is the memories behind them, the years when every crease was etched by worry, when every shadow beneath your eyes was carved by sleepless nights. Your daughter, now an adult, carries herself with determination, her resilience the strongest legacy she has built. She laughs, she works, she navigates a world that still often forgets her needs. But she does it with the same persistence you saw when she first learned to steady a cup against the table, or hold a pencil in her own way. Her scars are visible, her challenges inescapable, yet the world around her rarely acknowledges what they mean. People glance and then avert their eyes as if, pretending not to see, will erase what progress once inflicted. The fight for answers, the struggle for recognition, continues in echoes you no longer chase as fiercely. Lawsuits wind their way through courts, slow and grinding, producing settlements that feel more like bribes than justice. Committees and commissions publish reports, each promising to learn lessons to ensure this will never happen again. Documentaries appear on television, narrating the thalidomide tragedy in solemn tones. Their images faded black and white photographs of babies whose limbs mirror those of your own child. Historians write books, journalists revisit the scandal, and for a moment the world remembers. But memory is not the same as understanding. The words they use, scandal, tragedy, case study, rarely capture what it felt like to live through it day after day. They speak of statistics and numbers, of court cases and settlements, but not of the quiet nights spent improvising ways to dress your child, not of the exhaustion etched into your bones, not of the guilt that never left. For you, thalidomide is not a headline or a legal precedent. It is the sound of your daughter's laughter, cutting through the heaviness of a day that should have been unbearable. It is the sight of her pushing against the limits of her body, adapting again and again, even as strangers stared. It is the feeling of your husband's silence beside you, his love steady, but his grief buried too deep to share. It is the weight of your own guilt pressing against your chest every time you looked at the pillbox on the nightstand, remembering how easy it had been to trust. The world's memory fades, but yours does not. You live with it still, every day, every glance at your daughter, every breath you draw. Your husband grows old too, his hair thinned and greyed, his once straight posture bent by years of work and quiet endurance. He remains beside you, though his silences stretch longer than ever. He carries his devotion in small gestures, bringing tea, steadying you when your knees ache, resting a hand on your daughter's shoulder when she enters the room. He rarely speaks of the past and never of the pills, but the history lies in his face, in the way his eyes soften when he watches your daughter, in the way he looks at you when he thinks you aren't paying attention. He has aged with you inside this story, his resilience measured not by words but by the simple fact of still being there, even when the world long ago moved on. Sometimes your daughter speaks of it. She has her own words for what was done to her, her own anger shaped by the experiences you could not shield her from. She knows what the world says about thalidomide, knows the story has been told in many forms, but she also knows how shallow those versions often are. She carries the weight differently than you do, less as guilt, more as determination. She has found ways to live fully, to carve out space in a society that rarely thought to make space for her. Her strength fills you with pride, though pride never softens the guilt entirely. You see her achievements, but you also see the invisible cost, the ways her life has been bent around barriers that should never have existed. The glossy optimism of the 1950s and 60s has long since passed. The neon-lit pharmacies, the chrome instruments in shining hospitals, the promises of progress that seemed unshakable, all have dulled with time. What remains is not the glow of modernity, but its shadow, a betrayal you still carry. You remember sitting in a doctor's office, reassured with smooth words. You remember holding the box of tablets, their typography bold and clean, their promise simple and seductive. You remember swallowing them with trust, believing you were part of a world that had finally learned to ease women's burdens. That moment feels like a lifetime ago, but its consequences lie beside you still, in your daughter's body, in your own heart. When people speak of thalidomide now, they often speak as though it is finished, a story from another time. They speak of it as a warning, an example of what must not happen again. But for you, it was never just history. It was life itself. It was the silence of the hospital, the stares of strangers, the pity that edged every interaction. It was the exhaustion of making daily life possible when the world offered no support. It was the abandonment by the very institutions that claimed to protect you. The horror of thalidomide was never only in the drug that reshaped your child's body. It was in the silence, the stares, the abandonment, and the weight of a trust broken forever. And that brings us to the end of tonight's slow descent into the life of a mother who trusted in progress, only to find that modern medicine carried silence heavier than sickness, and that the promises of safety left scars written on her child forever. Feel free to like, subscribe, or leave a comment with another forgotten corner of history you'd like explored next. If you'd like early access to more of these quiet descents into forgotten history, ad-free audio of the episodes, or just want to support the show, there's a link to the Patreon in the description. If you're listening on a podcast app, a rating or review helps more people find their way to these stories. And special thanks to the supporters who make this show possible, including our chroniclers, Andrew S. and Rich Davis. Sleep well.